All right, we are here for Voice of All Things, Chapter 1081 discussions with BDA Law. If you guys don't know, this episode was a difficult thing to schedule, right? Because
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys are on Twitter, if you guys saw the issues, the blocks here and there, you know, you should
hard
tune
to get in
into.
contact with you, man. It's hard to get in contact with you.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, there's a lot of things going on, but One Piece, brings us together. We could push aside our,
Exactly.
our problems and still talk One Piece, and those problems might still be ongoing. But what's also important is that those issues, especially if you tune into Brago's stream discussion for 1081, the details, which you guys should go in. There's a lot of I heard you're starting a book club also, Brago, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, a book club is on the way. Very specific, serious, mature books that we will be covering. So if that's something you guys are interested in, you can tune in Saturday nights at 8 p.m. So yeah, I'm excited for
Nah,
that.
you got the time slot in too. That's funny. And I think what's also good about that is you guys will now know that Brago's not biased towards me. He has no bias towards my agendas, my
At
theories,
all.
my thoughts at all. So it's like anything you hear today, just know that there's no Brago doesn't mean to be on my side.
At all.
If he comes,
Anti-par.
yeah, at the end of it, if he ends up agreeing, it's you guys should imagine what you guys see for the end of One Piece, because
That
I
means that he
think,
convinced me, for
yeah,
real.
exactly.
Because
So
I'm trying to disagree today. That's the whole goal.
yeah. Um, no, that's yo,
That's crazy. People probably gonna believe it.
yeah. Um, so I haven't kept obviously with the beef that we have, I haven't been keeping tabs. Everyone knows I'm hopping into streams, but we've been avoiding each other here and there. So I don't really know how the last few chapters have hit you really. 1079, interesting. I think the Shank stuff was, it raised a bar, and then we
Yeah.
hit 1080, which left a few question marks. And I got to talk with King of Lightning, and you guys both
Mm.
were like, we were wrong. And then I saw your recent title of you were wrong again twice, and I was just kind of like, what exactly is that like referencing? And is like with the Garp, like his power levels,
Um.
Kuzan, what do you see for that?
So that we were wrong again was basically uh, letting King of Lightning and his thoughts, because he said that my title would be we were wrong,
Uh-huh.
because uh, King of Lightning is known for his Garp slander,
Yes.
right? So
Which he
there's been
redacted, which is funny because when I posted the video of us, people were
mm,
like, ain't no way he's still sliding in pot shots at Garp and saying that, like, hey, I didn't say he was weak. I just said he was old and slow, and maybe older
yeah,
and slower. And I'm like, yo,
yeah. I mean, some of it was blasphemous, right? Some of it was crazy. Some of it was I was like, "Cool, what are you talking about?" Um, but it was just kind of like a nod to him saying that's what a title would be. So just just throwing a little jab in there again. The past few chapters, I would say, has been, if not the best stretch, best 3 chapter stretch in the post time skip. You could say in One Piece, based off of lore, obviously, characters, important characters doing things, matchups we wanted for a long time, knowledge about certain things, and so excitement, hype, and these 3 chapters have been just fantastic. The Shank stuff was, incredible. Not as incredible for kid fans, right? Because unfortunately, another L. That's just how it goes for kid, I guess. Um, then Garp coming in and doing his thing, and even getting in a good hit on Aokiji. It's Oda giving a nod, as he's previously said in SBS, like he really respects old guys in anime, just old guys in general. And so no matter who the old guy is, he's gonna make them look, especially the old legends, right? He's gonna
Yeah.
make them look good. He's gonna make them look great. However, you know, I have a very sinking feeling about Garp being in Hachinosu. Still,
Nah, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think like people were calling me out like, "Yo, I can't believe Par's on the Garp slander." I'm like, "Wait, what do you mean? Like, I love Garp, but
it is an insane. I don't. Here's what I realized. I realized we're at a place where because Garp is actually doing stuff now, and Shanks is doing stuff, and is becoming a lot more clashes, fights, etc. There are people that are jumping into this conversation about like power scaling
mhm,
that don't normally power scale. So they hear
raise
someone
his hand."
say, "Oh, well, Garp isn't stronger than this guy." They're like, "What? Garp wasn't top 5 for you?" And it's like, "Wait, no." Like, not at all. So it's like jarring for a lot of people when they hear actual power scaling conversations because it's so intertwined with chapter talk.
Yeah.
It's kind of like throwing people off a lot where um I know when Garp first said he was going to go after Blackbeard, I remember I made a video about it saying that, okay, like he doesn't want to do that because it's not going to end well for him, especially if he encounters Blackbeard. People are like, what are you talking about? Garp is stronger than Blackbeard right now. And I was stunned that that was an actual take. But a
Mhm.
lot of people feel that way. A lot of people feel like Garp is still top 5 currently, at worst top 10. And so we're at a place where like if you don't think Garp is going to beat Aokiji, then you're hating Garp or it's Garp slander, which
Mhm.
is I think is insanity.
No, it's funny because like I don't think of myself as a power scaler, and like my two videos, the Shanks one and Garp one, I was pointing out it's like, yo, like especially with One Piece, you like there's a certain amount of power scaling that makes sense to do, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Hmm.
like you have enough information about them, but
Right.
that's what One Piece does. Where it's like if you don't have enough information,
You got a
it,
headcanon it.
you got a head canon it, and then so like the narrative is what's important there. And on like I threw out a 45-minute video about Garp and like the narrative thing because like last year after Wano, people, I don't know if you remember this. I asked you this in the DMs. I said Garp and Sengoku versus Kaido. So like Marineford, Garp and
Yeah,
Sengoku
yeah,
versus
yeah.
Kaido.
Against yeah. What did
And
I say?
you said, I asked you, Cole, and Jay, like and basically, surprisingly, all of you guys said a very similar thing. It was like extreme diff, and like I think you ended up giving it to Kaido, which like I completely understood at that time. It makes sense to say that, right? For
Right.
me, I was on Garp and Sengoku. I was just like, no, there's no way like the duo loses to this. Like the thing was, it's like they added Sengoku in that matchup as a handicap. They're like, you know what? We'll give Garp Sengoku as well. And I'm like,
And
that's
Goku as a handicap is insane.
yeah, yeah. So then I was like, that's disrespectful. There's no way you're saying that because if you add both of them, there's no way they're losing to Kaido. Like maybe extreme diff, but like I was saying,
It would be extreme. It'd be extreme.
and
'Cause Kaido is like anti old man, which means Kaido could technically, outside of the main character, even with the main character involved, he can fight for a very long time.
yeah,
And I think in One Piece, I think for old dudes, it's not necessarily about power on a regular basis. I think it comes down to stamina and just
mm,
how long can they go.
right.
And so, does Garp and Sengoku can they put Kaido down before they're too tired to continue? And I think that's be the main thing. And Kaido is like, even in the Luffy fight, like how many people he fought against, how many he took, how many attacks he took, but like these guys are not Garp and Sengoku.
Right.
Um,
And
in
like
hindsight, with all we know now, would I still put would I put Kaido over Garp and Sengoku? Probably,
it,
probably.
it's an interesting thing because like back then when I got through the conversation, I was like, nah, based off of what I think that
Mhm.
Garp is going to, in the current timeline, show us a Bajrang gun level attack. And like then we got Galaxy Impact, and I'm like, you can you guys see that vision now, right? Like if that's him like laughing and like crying, right? Imagine like angry, imagine him wanting to actually kill people, right? Like that, then you start getting to a level where it's like, yeah, using, if he did that with just hockey, imagine where he wanted to actually end someone's life, and then you get something close to that, right? Like you push Garp, and I was joking that like his last move in the series will probably be like Big Bang Collision or something like that, like some insane level attack. And
Yeah.
the thing is, it's like you can't get there from a power scaling perspective, but you can from a narrative perspective and like an anime shonen thing. And that's like the point of the last two videos, where it was just like, from a narrative point, it makes sense. And the backbone, the logic that gets you there is the characters that are at this level are there because of resolve. They like resolve themselves to something that's insane, that like most, like the only character that could resolve themselves to follow the path that they're on is those characters. Shanks being
You
an
know,
example, right? Like Garp being
that's a
another example.
perfect word for you to say here, because I think that explains Aokiji's journey and his current state of mind right now, resolve.
Yeah.
And
No.
I don't think Garp understands it, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, and like so using that logic, Garp is insanely strong. But if you also use that logic, Garp is dying. Like that's just like there's not a way around it, where it's like there's too many, like honestly, honestly, the two characters that introduced us, Shanks and Garp, like 1079, 1080, almost is like death flags for both of them. And I think like less people believe in the Shanks dying by the end of the series, but it's like, for me, it's like we're tying these two characters, and I feel like a lot of people, even before now, could see a world where Garp dies. It might not be their favorite timeline, but I'm gonna leave it to Oda to make it make sense. And that's the other part of that video, where it's like, Blackbeard. I said that in order for Garp to die, it has to be to Blackbeard, in my opinion. I don't think it's to Kuzan, but that
Kuzan
doesn't.
wouldn't kill him. He
Yeah,
wouldn't kill him.
exactly. And
He would capture him though.
right, exactly. I like, and this is something that I see where it's like, the thing that with Kuzan is like there's always like he puts a foot into the door and then something bad happens, like
Yeah.
because he's there. So for example, he participates at the Ohara thing, and then like he's doing his thing and Saul's questioning him the entire time, and then he's like, nah, this is chill, this is fine, whatever. But then Akainu ends up enacting absolute justice, and then he has to question himself. He went down this path, he was doing these things, and then boom, like now he's questioning, because the path that he followed, it might not be exactly what he wants. And then I could see what you just said, right? Like Kuzan captures Garp, he gets him to stalemate, everybody escapes, Garp is there, right? But then we get the reality from Shiryu. Shiryu might end up killing Garp, and like it might just be like, yo, we can't, like Shiryu just demonstrated his like insider knowledge about the world government, right? Like he has a certain perspective that's just like super logical, which I love.
Logic.
And I love that. I mentioned in my live reaction how like Shiryu saying that like the world government should just be taking up poneglyphs is something that like is so gamer meta, like that if you came into One Piece, it's like, why aren't they doing that? It's like, well, it's a story, blah blah blah, like it's not a video game, you know what I mean? And
I believe as well he's the one, I think he's the one that mentioned, it's like, hey, if this doesn't work, what are we gonna do, like in Marineford?
Yeah.
Is he the one?
I think he was like, if Blackbeard fails, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like, you know what I mean?
Which is like,
so, it's logic, man. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Like I don't have no reason to be here other than that. So you're right. He's kind of that guy that's always doing that.
So if Kuzan ends up like doing that, and then Shiryu is like, no, we can't lock up this man. Like you can't put a ball and chain to Garp like you did to Kobe and expect him to be locked down. I don't know how you lock. I've said this about Kaido too. Like
remember, you got an Iceman.
True, but like the thing is, it's like how much ice you gotta put around Garp, right? Like
you gotta really weaken him. You gotta really weaken him.
Yeah, and maybe that does happen, right? Like maybe we get like amputee old man Garp, which would be insanely tragic, right? Like I don't know if Oda's like that is gonna go that level to them, like. But then again, we see Whitebeard, right? Like he took off half of his face,
half his head,
put 2 holes into the man, like killed his son in front of him. Like Oda does do that to these old dudes too. So it's like,
but he had him go out in like glory though, you know what I mean? But Garp, if he manages to save Kobe, And actually do something impactful that kind of spurs. And he's already done that. Like, look at Sword. Look at the people that have followed. They're the way they are because of Garp. Like, Sword is the embodiment of how Garp operates, where it's more rogue. It's a lot more not by the book, right? With them, they're attacking a Yonko's territory right now. And a lot of these guys, like, just reading a chapter, it feels like set up for the future,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if we ever get two piece, but um Kobe is the new Garp, and Grus, he's the new Sengoku because he's the one with the devil fruit, and we have Suru's granddaughter there, right?
Yeah.
So those three are kind of there. And people are like, yo, what about Helmep? I'm like, well, Bogard, he's Kobe's Bogard, right? So it's like Oda is showing us like the future is actually pretty bright, and as long as Garp can preserve that and make sure that they get out okay, then he's kind of done his thing. Where for me, Garp has been more so operating the Marines passively active, meaning he's not necessarily going in and saying, yo, this specific action is going to change the Marines, but he's thinking, by me living life the way I want to, I'm sure that would change some lives and open some eyes as to how they should live as well.
Yep.
And that's what he's done by impacting people, like, and then now he's training, right? By training different people and kind of showing them how to be a true Marine. He's creating a generation of people that are like, yo, this is like, what if we do things this way? What if we don't follow alongside the world government and how they do things? But I think he's done a lot already. It's just that it makes too much sense for him to stay here and somewhat be used as leverage for someone like Blackbeard. But also for Garp, what his chapter told me is that he has a specific way of doing things, and his mind, not necessarily one track, but he thinks to impact the world and to change the world in a good way, you must be in uniform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whatever it is, be in uniform. So I'm sure for Aokiji, he's super disappointed because he's not in uniform any longer, right? He told him, like, get back in uniform, which I wonder if that's how him and Dragon, that's where the falling out happened, where he questioned Aokiji's resolve because he left the Marines. Where for
Mm-hmm.
Dragon, I don't think no one will question his resolve, but it's like a different way of doing it. Where did him and Dragon fall out because he just can't see past the Marines, right? It was like, how could you impact the world? You're going to be a criminal, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what you do, you're a criminal. And for Dragon, when he saw Luffy being a pirate in chapter 100, I believe, he was like, oh, a pirate? That's okay too, right? Because at the end of the day, they're chasing freedom. And so for Garp, I think freedom, he's the embodiment of that within the Marines, but there's still a restriction that Luffy and Dragon, they can't abide by. And so I think we're learning more about his character, which could lead, like, if Garp does go down here, we're going to get a very important flashback conversation between him and Dragon,
Mm-hmm.
because we're not going to get it in real time
Yeah.
unless Dragon shows up to save him, which I don't think happens. Doesn't
No,
make sense.
yeah, that I was actually gonna make that a thumbnail actually, but the oh man, the dragon thing it's so interesting you said that, because that was another aspect where when you look at the monkey family, they kind of all embody the same thing, just separate career paths, like
Yeah.
freedom is across the board on all of them. And what's super interesting that I pointed out in the last video was that Garp hates pirates. Garp doesn't like Shanks. Garp was insulting, Luffy many, many times about being a pirate. It chose the wrong path. Same thing with Ace. Ace was like on death row and he called him like a scallywag. And it's like, bro, like timing, hello? You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
is now the time when you do this, right? But at the same time, he never said anything negative about Dragon. Dragon was brought up like 2 or 3 times in front of him. Not a
Yeah.
single negative thing. He also, like, he blurted out Dragon's name too. And he's just like, yeah, Luffy, that's your dad, right? And that's like super odd when you consider what the revs stand for, right? When we were introduced in chapter 432 to Garp and the revs logic, Robin said was like, pirates are disjointed, pirates are just like chaos, but the revs are the actual only organization that are running against the Navy and world government. They look
Right.
to like topple it, but then it's like, so why is Dragon and Garp like seemingly like, the other part of it is Garp was like, seemed like he talked to Dragon. He was just like, yo, your dad said he was gonna meet up with you at Logtown. It's like, how did you talk to Dragon? Like, why? You
Yeah.
talk to a criminal like openly? How as the
That's a Garp way.
legendary hero of the Marines, how do you just openly talk to the world's worst criminal in a secretive way? Because that's the other part. It's like Garp isn't necessarily a secretive dude. Like Kuzan even said it in this chapter where he was just like, oh, I love like you say what's on your mind, like that kind of thing, you know, across all the fan scans in Viz now. That's like what he basically said. It's like, oh, you just say what's on your mind, you get to the point, that kind of a thing. So like Garp in a lot of ways is not a secretive dude, yet he seems to not dislike Dragon, so that can apply a lot of things. And so to fill you in, actually, was the point of that last video was, yes, like, why is Garp as strong as he is? Why did I see a future where he has a Bajrang gun level attack? Like, and
Right.
now it's like, it's not even a question of like, in his prime, he definitely did. Like, there's no
He definitely
question
did.
about that,
He
right?
definitely did.
It's
Yeah.
like, can he pull that out now? And I feel like he could, and it comes back to the resolve and everything. It's like, what is that sense of justice? Because Oda actually hasn't shown us that yet. He told us Suru's, he told us Sengoku's, he told us the Admirals, but for some reason in the Vivre cards, he didn't tell us Garp's. And so in that last video, I talked about how Garp's sense of justice, I think, is fatherly justice. I think that's what it is, and that's like a,
Fatherly justice. Explain that one for me.
so the, like, very briefly, you know, as a 45-minute video, but very briefly, something that ends up happening once you know, Garp lets Luffy take that hit on him, right? When he does that, he gets to the ground, he accepts it. Like at this point, it's very obvious to say like Garp, even after getting hit, could have just like hacked his way back. Like at that point, it's like, yeah, Garp could have just like spirit bombed Luffy at any point in that situation, but he couldn't. He was vulnerable. He was vulnerable at Marineford twice when it came to Ace and Luffy, and after Luffy landed the hit, Sengoku says, so you chose to be a father before a Navy man. And the thing is, it's like when you look at Garp throughout the entire story, he has done nothing but insubordination, treason. Like, he has not done a single good thing for besides God Valley, he has not done a single good thing for the world government. In that, like, in his introduction, he let Captain Morgans go. He saved Kobe, and Kobe and Himampo swam back to him, but he just let Morgan go. Dadan, for example, is a criminal that he's
A
just
criminal.
like, what does he want her to do? Raise his grandchildren, become their like
Right.
foster mother. It's a
It's crazy. I mean, and then again, like him going after, he met Luffy, right? He could have caught him if he wanted to, and it's just
right.
like, he tried after they left, but it's like, okay. But now I think, okay, the fatherly justice thing, I could see that.
And then
It, it's
you add to like the Marineford, when you really think about it, yeah, we say Blackbeard did it, but no, actually when you really think about it, Garp is the reason for Marineford, because Ace shouldn't have existed. He had a soft spot for kids that Roger exposed, and so Garp in that moment probably did the second worst crime that he could have done in like all of One Piece, of keeping Ace alive. Like, they literally like killed all the pregnant people and
yeah,
children, and
around that time,
Garp
which is
saved
messed up.
Ace. Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
but that goes to Carp and everything he's done. Where it's like, I don't adhere to how you guys do things.
yeah.
I'm gonna follow just my way of living, which I don't think a kid should die.
Right.
That kid is innocent.
Yep.
But now the kid is an adult. The kid has made his own decisions. My hands are kind of tied.
Yeah.
So it's tough. But I always wonder, like, how Sengoku found out that Ace was Roger's son.
I think he told him. But like, it's
Yeah,
like he can't do anything to Garp, and it's like his homie too, right? Like,
I think he kind of blurted it out. Like, yeah,
yeah,
by
no,
the way.
I think so 100%.
Yeah,
And like,
yeah,
you know, and something else that I think the one time in the entire series where we actually get like insight of Garp is when he's talking to King Neptune and Shirahoshi. He talks about the Reverie and how like the Reverie, it's like, how do you expect kings of all these different nations to care about their own people and someone else's? And then at the end of it, he says, as long as no blood is spilled, that's what I consider peace. That's what I
yeah,
call peace. And when you
yeah.
think about that, so the reason, the first thing I say is familial justice. I think that's what Garp is, but fatherly justice is what like he might be, like what Odo might choose. And the reason why that really works for me is because in the story we see time and time again how much someone bends over back for their family, for being like a parent, whatever. In Whitebeard example, right, Squard stabbed him and he still forgave him instantly. And the point being is like, when it comes to fighting, it's like if everyone treated each other like that they were family, or that there was a family behind every person they fought, and they realized that, then there would be no blood spilt. Because like, you know, Garp hits Luffy, but Luffy knows that Garp loves him, right? And it's funny because I pointed out like a huge foil between Garp and Morgan. Morgan was the character that when Garp was introduced is faced off against Morgan's, like it was literally side by side. And Morgan's is like the fake Garp. He's like, I'm great, blah blah blah. And something that he said was to Helmeppo was, Helmeppo's just like, oh, why don't you get that guy, blah blah, he hit me, you never even hit me. And Morgan says, I never hit you because I don't care about you.
Yeah,
And like, you know, that's a very out of pocket
yeah,
thing nowadays, but like, you know, obviously we can understand back in the day the environment the world was. But like, you can see that
yeah,
separation where it's like, even though Garp is hitting Luffy knows that he's loved. Morgan isn't caring about Helmeppo, which is why he doesn't care to discipline him, right? And that overarching point is like, yeah, if kings looked at another king like that's a family, or like that's my like a family related to mine, right? Then there would probably be a lot less blood spilt and more understanding. And we see that with Garp. He's now adopted Ace, Luffy, Sabo, like all of these kids that, you know, well, Luffy is his, but like, you know, and
hmm
then there's the whole question about Dragon, whether that's actually like a biological connection or not. But it's like, we see that behind with Garp. And, you know, and then he says, what's it called, like taught Aokiji to live in the now, right? And I think it plays really well on what Garp is doing in the story. And that's why I say that it has to be Blackbeard that kills him, because Blackbeard is the one character in the entire series, especially from antagonist, that has no care for a family. He's the one who dismantled Whitebeard, the ultimate family man on the pirate side. And so it would just make sense that as like this person, the embodiment of another family, Garp is the one being taken down. And then you see like how Garp cares about Kobe in this moment and all of that. And then it gets us to like Kuzan and where that situation's at and the resolve behind that. Because I feel like it makes sense, the power that we're seeing from Garp, if it's tied to family, that's a huge thematic that Oda wants to push. And then if Blackbeard's the one to dismantle it for whatever he wants to do, it's beautiful setup for Blackbeard. And my perspective, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I see Blackbeard or Garp as Blackbeard's Kaido in a way, where it's like, if Blackbeard is not like Gear 5 level or higher or Shanks level strong, then Garp is the way for Blackbeard to get to that level. And so like Luffy just overcame Kaido, it's not like we think that Gear 5 Luffy can 1v1 Kaido on its own, but now Luffy has opened the door to that world where he can be. And I think Blackbeard hopefully is going to eventually face Garp and transcend his level to become that like powerful, super powerful antagonist at that level. And you know, Kuzan I think is one of the most the biggest question marks, especially
mm.
from so many angles. And I think the best question to start on is what do you think about Kuzan and his resolve? You said it earlier, like is he resolved? Is he focused here? Is he still searching for a meaning? Is he actually on the Blackbeard side, or is this a double play? What do you think about Kuzan?
I think Kuzan is finally living the way he wants to. Um, Kuzan is what, 50 something years old, 49 years old,
Okay.
51, something like that.
Looking good
I think
for it.
he's the youngest admiral well, at the time. Um and so we got to look at his journey. And he was smitten by Garp. He said Garp saved his life different occasions. Um and like you said, that O'Hara incident, it somewhat broke him,
Yeah.
right? It changed him forever. Where at that moment he realized that, I, as much as I try to impact the Marines, etc., I don't have control because it can just be overridden by someone higher and over top of me, right?
Yeah.
Um, where the crazy part about Luffy and Blackbeard is that they both have this somewhat insane, intense, unexplainable charisma that can make you see things you didn't see before. So in the chapter, it made me realize that Blackbeard did actually convince Kuzan to live the way he wants to, but at the end of the day, that does not completely change the man,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for Kuzan, he's now a free man. He left the Marines and he's doing what he wants to do. But that's still in the lane of justice, just not the way Garp thinks it is. Where for Garp, he said he taught Kuzan to live in the moment, right? And for Kuzan, that's how he used to be. He was active, he was upbeat, he was like following Garp, like he was a fan. And so in the moment, like imagine a Kainu, right? And everything in O'Hara, and telling someone to live in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, say Garp was there and a Kainu blew up that ship. What is Garp doing there, you think?
I feel like it would be it would be like he'd bite his tongue, you know what I mean? Like he can't go back and save those people, but like the only thing that might make sense is that he intercepts it, like, you know what I mean? Like a Kainu goes to blow it up, and then,
If he
I think
can. But
if
it's like at that point it's like, if it actually blows up, it's kind of like his hands are tied.
yeah,
He
yeah,
can't do
can't do
anything.
anything.
Right? So living in the moment, there are limits to that as well. Look at Garp in Marineford, living in the moment. Ace died. Couldn't do anything. You got to eat that,
Yeah,
right? As mad as you were, Sengoku's like, no, you're about to throw everything away. So for Aokiji, how Garp raised him to be like him, that's not who he is anymore, right? Um, and so Garp says to Aokiji, and I was waiting for the official to come out because their translation says that hesitating is a sign of weakness, and the official says wavering is a sign of weakness.
yeah.
And so for Garp, it's almost like
Which is that resolve, by the way.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. He does not believe in Aokiji's resolve. If you know how Garp would believe in it, and not just Garp, the world, Blackbeard, even us as the readers. If Kuzan actually takes down Garp here, his mentor, the person that we know he loves and cherishes, then we're gonna be like, damn, Kuzan really is a pirate.
yeah,
But that is all overridden by Kuzan's conversation with Smoker. When he met Smoker, this is after the entire conversation with Blackbeard. This is after all that,
yeah,
right? And he said, yo, bro, I'm still me.
yeah,
Okay. Like, no matter what, I'm still me. Which, okay, who is Kuzan then? His history, it speaks for itself. He is the man that's willing to let a flower that's growing out of the concrete next to thorns. He's like, even if it's a good chance this flower could be impacted by these thorns and grow the same way into something that we need to stomp out in the future, let's see how it grows.
right.
Let's see. Because then I'll personally take care of take care of it, taking care of removing it. But let's see how it grows. A kind who's like, yeah, if we can stop something right now, let's let's get it out the way. And Kuzan is probably in regards to the Marines or the admirals, from what we saw, just the one that exudes the most humanity, right? Who believes in people. Technically, look at Saul. Saul is alive. Was that intentional?
Yeah. Of
Was
the
it
OG
him
admirals, Fujitora
of the
is
OG
interesting.
admirals?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Fujitora is also,
Yeah.
there, but the OG admirals, he was the one that was most understanding. He could have gotten the straw hats several
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
right? Where he was there after Ennie's lobby.
Yeah. And he didn't do anything.
He was there.
Yeah.
Didn't do anything. Where he understands like Robin and where she is at that point, it doesn't need to be snuffed out. Let's see how this goes.
Right.
Right? She's actually grown into a decent human being. She's around people that I think are decent people. Even though like this is super dangerous, I'm gonna see how this goes.
Right.
That person doesn't just automatically change after, honestly, his resolve was to be the fleet admiral, and he doesn't want to be under someone like a Kainu. He doesn't automatically turn to the side of pirates to now uproot things that he's helped establish. That's not who he is. For Kuzan, and I was talking to somebody about this, and um they brought up a good point. They said Kuzan and everything he's been going towards, what if his goal is the separation of the Marines and the world government?
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad.
It's not bad at all.
Yeah.
But it's like, because everything that typically goes wrong within the Marines, it's because of the overarching Gorosei and the world government, because they're kind of presiding over them. And that kind of creates a conflict of interest. I was talking about it when I kind of did not know Kizaru went with the Gorosei.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I'm like, I'm the fleet admiral, and I don't know when a direct subordinate is going on a mission like that, because I have to answer to the world government who can just override that. There should be some separation of powers, some checks and balances, if you may, at some point. And I feel like that does not exist because everything is ran, of course, as we know, by the Gorosei and Imu.
Right.
Now, back to Kuzan, I think Oda is going to show his resolve here. Because again, he's, like Blackbeard said, like from Blackbeard's perspective, pirates don't have to be friends. We're not all friends here. We all have our own agendas, and that's fine. She's like, you can be here and have your own agenda. Like, only thing we need is just for our interests to align.
Right.
And it seems like people are saying Blackbeard's goal is to make Hachinos the pirate island. That's what he said. It feels like a step to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just a step towards something. Now, if you already told Kuzan his true goal, and in some way that involves the eradication of Mary Joa and the world government, as bad as it looks from the outside perspective, that will be a net positive for the world if Mary Joa falls. Now, I would presume Kuzan is also resolved to taking down Blackbeard when the time comes, which he will obviously fail. But if their interests align, which they obviously do because he's with Blackbeard, one can assume what Blackbeard is trying to do, Kuzan thinks it's going to be actually good for the world. So I do not think he's a bad person. I just think he's finally living his life the way he would want to, where I'm kind of seeing things through.
Yeah.
Right? I'm seeing things through. Like with Robin, like I could snuff it out right now, right? But let's see how it grows.
Right.
Let's see how it grows. And then when the time comes, I'll step up. But Kuzan is still Kuzan.
No, I love the way you said that, because it's right now, I think the community wants Sword or Blackbeard. And in my last stream, I dug into a deep hole where it was essentially like, I don't think it's either. I don't think it's either. There might be something else. I don't know what else, but I like what yours is. The what else in your explanation is more so the what else is him. Like it's himself, and like there
Yeah.
doesn't need to be an alliance to anything. And that actually fits Kuzan really well because it's like it's the alliances that essentially broke him down, right? He had to ally with the world government, and the Gorosei are the ones who ordered the
Hmm.
execution of Ohara. And so
Hmm.
like if he doesn't agree with that, then why would he want more of that, right? And so what you said is like if time and time again it's the Gorosei putting orders that he doesn't agree with, why work with them? And like you said, if it's the separation of like not to bring it to our world, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
government and the policing force,
Yeah.
then that could be, I mean, in the One Piece world, it's not necessarily even government. It's more so like religion and execute the executive branch or whatever. But so
Yeah.
like I do like that, and that actually fits into something that I want to bring up, which is wow, I don't even need to change the video because that fits in so well. Like we see in this situation in chapter 1081, he freezes Hibari but not Kobe. And it's
Mhm.
like there's a sense of like why didn't you just why not just Kobe, right? Because then later on he's just like, will you kill your own subordinate or your favorite protege versus me, right? Your first student, whichever apprentice, whichever one, right?
Mhm.
And it kind of is like, well, maybe he doesn't necessarily know Hibari, right? Like Hibari might have been like a post time skip connection to Kobe, right? But he probably knows Kobe, right? Like the reference of all that. It's the same thing with Smoker. It's like a friend, you know what I mean? It's like these are people that he has a bias towards, and so when it comes to these certain things, he is fine with sticking himself out there for those people, even if it's underneath Blackbeard's. And I still have a question with when it comes to Blackbeard and how he handles Kobe. I wonder if Kuzan will ever stick like actively stick out for him, right? Recently it was like, oh yeah, teach this won't work because
Mhm.
Kobe's in sword, blah blah. You could see that as him trying to help out Kobe. You could see that as so many different ways. And maybe it is that because he's just saying like, yeah, Kobe, I don't have any beef with him. He's not evil, right? He's not the Gorosei. He's not a bad pirate, whatever. And that at the end of the day, it's like
But
the labels don't matter, right? Pudding, he still captured her, right? Like, but he doesn't necessarily like it. She's a pirate, but does that matter to him anymore, right?
this
It's
chapter like confirmed. I think to me it really confirmed that Aokiji was definitely trying something with Blackbeard.
mhm.
It was at least buying time because he said to Garp, "Will you kill your senior apprentice to save your protege?"
Yeah.
So he's aware of Kobe and what he means to Garp. He understands that. It's not like he doesn't know who Kobe is, right? So he's like, in his own way, he's trying to see where it goes with Kobe. Like you said, he didn't freeze Kobe,
Yeah.
right? He let him go. He just froze Sabari, which people are speculating that Kainu thing because she should be related to a Kainu.
That's
She's
rude
just
though.
like, it's like a little,
Yeah.
you know. But I think that's what I appreciate most about Aokiji because even in the midst of this insane situation, it's still like, yeah, will you kill your senior apprentice to save your protege? But Garp is still like, yo, wavering is a sign of weakness. I have no problem trying to kill you, and the tough part is like I don't think he can kill Aokiji. I just I don't think he can.
I think it
But
goes back to the fatherly justice type of thing. He's
yeah,
gonna when it
yeah,
comes down to that finishing blow, the
yeah,
moment where let's say it gets to that point, right?
yeah.
Whether it needs to, whether there's plot in between, when it gets to that point, I feel like he's gonna have like the Luffy flashback. I mean, it might not be the same thing, but we also have to realize like in between now and what chapter 0, 27 years, and Kuzan at the time was like what near vice admiral rank, but like he was looking up to Garp, and they probably had a lot of time together. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a huge like bias there. And you know, so let's I think we are in agreement that it's like, I don't think it's with Blackbeard, but Blackbeard also said it's like you don't need to be with me to be here, right? Like there might be something else, and I like what you said too. There might be an end goal that was not told to us. It's off screen,
Hmm. Yeah,
that lines
for
up with
sure.
what Kizaru said. I mean, not Kizaru, Kuzan wants, and
Hmm.
That could make a lot of sense. And now the question is that the right path towards getting that dream, or is someone like Luffy better to align with? Because I always feel like Luffy and Blackbeard probably have the same idea, and it's just like a difference of like how
I
they get there, right?
The thing is, Luffy's dreams, it's a lot more disjointed,
Yeah.
right? Where if Kuzan met Luffy in the bar, what are you trying to accomplish? Nothing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I just want to be the pirate king. He's like, what? And it's like, you can't it's hard for most people to get behind that,
Right.
right?
You have to box
Because
Luffy until like 80 chapters in, and Kaido finally is like, "Oh, you just want to feed your friends? All right, I'm down." You know what I mean? Like,
it's like really simplistic, but for Blackbeard, I'm sure he had a very specific, defined goal where
mhm.
Kuzan was like, okay, I can get behind that. And for
Yeah.
the longest, I was like, Kuzan is trying to take down Blackbeard. If he's trying to take down Blackbeard, he would have done it already. Because Blackbeard was not like the headcanon I have is Blackbeard when he met Kuzan actually in that bar, he still had 2 devil fruits.
Yeah.
I think Blackbeard has 3 now.
Okay.
And at that point where Blackbeard met Kuzan, one could argue they're probably still around the same strength or around close to that strength. I think Blackbeard has obviously gotten stronger now.
Yeah.
So if Kuzan is trying to actually take down Blackbeard as his goal, he would have done it then because he wiped out everyone that was with him in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
Right? So that's not the goal here. That's not the only thing Kuzan is trying to accomplish with Blackbeard. And it's not him flipping sides because he's mad at Akainu. It's deeper than that.
So
And so whatever Blackbeard laid out, he's on board with, but of course it's gonna go too far, and then somebody else is gonna have to step in.
So it's interesting because I still see a world where Kuzan is sword. I still see a world where it is, but it's so deep. It's so deep that it's like it's such a low percentage of probability for me at the moment.
Yeah.
And I've explained it on the live stream if you guys want to go hear that. But I think for the sake of conversation, you would say she's not in sword, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, another question. Garp. Do you think Garp is the leader of Sword? I know we talked a little bit at the Garp summit that Randy had, but like Garp being in Sword, being the leader of Sword, where are you with that?
I don't necessarily think Garp is in sword because I don't think he'd thrive in sword necessarily.
Okay, perfect,
Right.
perfect.
But I think he is the inspiration. He's the reason why sword exists though.
Right.
Right. Creating an organization that can, like, if it wasn't called sword, it'd be called like the Garp Corps, right? Like,
He definitely
right?
didn't name it, right? Like it just
Right?
doesn't make
You know what I'm
sense.
saying?
Yeah.
It's people in the Marines that are actively not directly opposing the Marines, but showing their displeasure with how the Marines are currently run. And so they are a rogue organization within the Marines, just like Garp is a rogue Marine within the Navy. And so I don't think he's a member of Sword.
That's
I
an
really don't.
interesting perspective because like I've been rereading it, and I know a lot of people have that like the rogue, like they're against the world government or the Navy, and I've been kind of like thinking about it, like I don't see it that way. I see them
Mm,
as underneath the Navy. Like I think that Akainu, for example, knows about it. I think Akainu knows what sword is. I think all the admirals know what sword is, actually, because when we go back to chapter 509 in Sabaody, Kizaru knows that Drake isn't a pirate. He knows that like he is a pirate, but he's just like, oh, former rear admiral, you're doing recon work for that, right? And he doesn't blow his cover, but he's also like, good luck against the pacifistas. You should know how powerful these are. But Kizaru
mm,
demonstrates knowledge of sword there, and it's like, is Kizaru in sword? No, I don't think so. And that goes back to my logic of I don't think any sitting admiral could be in sword. That's one, and I don't think Garp can be in sword by the same logic line of why the admirals, because what Kuzan told us, and whether he's lying or not, I see it as him not telling all of the truth. I think everything he said was the truth, but he didn't tell us everything that is available. But if if you agreed that if Kuzan's not in Sword and he was never a part of Sword, well, that would make sense why he knows about Sword,
Hmm.
because as an admiral at that rank, he probably has privilege of that knowledge. And the
Yeah.
reason why an admiral and Garp couldn't be in Sword is because they are too famous. What
Yeah.
Kuzan specifically said was, these are people that the Navy at the drop of a hat could just write off and be like, oh, we're not connected to, right? You can't do that with an admiral. If an admiral just acts up on an island and destroys it, it's like, oh, he's not an admiral. It's like, no, you can't do that, right? And you also
Yeah.
can't do that with the legendary hero of the Marines either. So
The
that's
tough
why,
part though is that one could argue Kobe's pretty famous right now.
yeah, Kobe's an interesting one because he's gaining fame,
Right.
but he's also, and there's an asterisk I have, which would sidetrack us a little bit, but like I think I understood what happened at Rocky Port a little bit more with
Mm.
a separate line of logic. But going back to like the sword thing, it's like, okay. I think you said it too. Like Garp is definitely the inspiration. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people are like confused, like how do you think that Garp isn't there? I get that part, but it's like he came in with Sword's entire team is there, he's working in junction with them, all of that. And I think that like you can know about Sword and you could be supporting of it, you don't have to be in it, right? Like, and
Right.
I think with Sword specifically, something that's really important is that I don't think that they are against the Marines. I think that they're like the Black Ops. You know what I mean? I think that they're like the Navy SEALs, right? Like I think that they're that level of like in our military. There's this covert group that is under wraps, and they can get away with like, hey, yo, we're not connected with them, and then you like get the redacted files 20 years later, and it's like, oh wait, this dude was a Navy SEAL this entire time. It's like, there's the Green Berets and all of that. I feel like it's that, and even more so, I think that there's multiple factions in the Marines, and we know that there is, which Sword is one of them. But there's also the Bureau of Investigation that Tensei is leading.
Yeah.
Tensei is Black Horse. He's an admiral candidate like character. We never were told he was an admiral candidate, but he shares
Right.
the same naming scheme, and he has the same inspiration where all the current day admirals, or the admirals that we know and the new ones, are all based off of movie characters, which is a very important note. Like it's a
Hmm.
1-to-1, the actor, the movie role that they played, and then the admiral. It's like literally, and that goes to the admiral candidates as well. Pink Rabbit, Brown Pig, they're all the same thing, based off of an actor, 1-to-1 thing. And same thing with Black Horse or Tensei, he's the same way. And then you get Bureau of Investigation, which is another separation in the Marines. That guy
Yeah.
is leading something separate, where I was saying that, like, if you guys think that Fujitora might be in Sword, I think Fujitora might have been in that, and that might be why he blinded himself. For example, he like had to investigate
Mm.
something, he saw some
Okay.
crazy evil, he had to blind himself. And that's a separate video that I'm going to make later
I like
on.
that idea.
And I think that there's at minimum one other group, and I think the name was told to us. It's similar to Sword and all of that. And so, that being said, what we do know about Sword so far, and it's funny, is that we still don't know what Sword does. We still don't know why it's made, what their end goal is. We just know what the people in it are doing, but we don't know why they're doing it. And so what we do know is we see Drake going in and going into Kaido's crew under the radar, under the guise of Sword.
Hmm.
And that seems like an agenda that Oda wanted to highlight with Sword, and that led to many theories, Law being in Sword, for example, and that like
Yeah.
the Luffy's crew. I don't know if a lot of people were talking about this, but for a long time, in junction with that, it's like I would imagine that Shanks might have someone in his crew. And the reason why I say that, and I talk about it in the video, is is
Information infiltration.
is that at the Marineford, right? They knew Shanks's movement.
Checks
He
it.
was at New World.
Yeah. They knew
Um,
he was. They knew when he broke through Whitebeard's defenses, I believe, and they knew when they like had interacted, and they said it again recently, didn't they? So they're like they know when Shanks is like actually moving.
and they said
So,
that he clashed with, or he met up with Kaido, which I was
Kaido.
like,
Yeah.
wait a second, how do you know that? How does some random Marine see that unless there was a mole? And the thing is, Drake wasn't in Kaido's crew at that time, so you would imagine that if there was a mole in Kaido's crew, then that Drake wouldn't need to infiltrate. So that almost implies that there is a mole in Shanks's crew. And that lending itself to the idea that, Kuzan could also be in that boat. But I think it just makes sense that he's not. I think that Blackbeard might have been a character, or a Yonko group that essentially was too new at the time or whatever. And maybe that is the line that Kuzan takes. But at the end of the day, I think that the point of Sword is kind of like a front informant, someone that you send in, and they kind of let you know about these groups that are super powerful and that can disturb the peace of the world government, the Navy, whatever it is. And that's how they end up tracking it. And then, like, that goes back to Corazon, for example, right? Like, Corazon probably at this point makes sense to be in Sword because of what he was doing at Doflamingo. And it also lends itself to, like, literally anybody could be the ops at that point, right? Like, your own brother could be the ops at that point. And I think that makes a lot of sense with Sword. And it gets confusing because we still don't know a lot about Sword. For example, we don't know the leader, right? Like, at the moment, Prince Gruz seems like to be the highest rank, but there's also, he's only a rear admiral. You'd almost imagine that there is a vice admiral, there is an admiral level character as well. And given all the connections that there is, I think that there's one character that makes sense for that position. But let's just walk back to a certain situation that is still super interesting to me. It's the fact that at Dressrosa, Kuzan, or Blackbeard, expresses his distrust for Kuzan at the time, I believe in the call with Burgess when he was locked up, right? And then what ends up happening after Dressrosa is Burgess is stowed away, ends up on Baltigo, which is the revolutionary headquarters of where Dragon is. And somehow Burgess calls Lafitte and Shiryu, tells them, like, yo, come through, bring Blackbeard, Sabo's here, Dragon's here. This is the revolutionary headquarters that nobody has known about. I don't even know where this is. It's just all white. Nobody has known about this for decades, blah, 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 right? Then flash forward, we get the headlines in the newspaper. The headquarters is destroyed. And there's obviously, like, a lot of people are like, oh my God, like, Dragon's so weak because it took down, or Blackbeard took him down. It's like, well, if you think about it, it's like, if that's the case, then why are there no casualties on revolutionaries? Why is there no mention? Like, Dragon has never said, like, oh man, that Blackbeard thing set us back. It's like, no, we just have to, like, relocate. But
relocate.
And my headcanon has always been, like, Dragon couldn't fight that fairly because he has a bunch of refugees to protect. Like, if he has to protect refugees and fight Blackbeard, who has the Gura Gura, he's not going to have the upper hand.
Doesn't make sense,
right?
It doesn't make sense.
But then in the headline, we get the details that through an anonymous source, the location of the revolutionary headquarters was leaked. And so then, but before Cypherpole and the Navy could make it there, Blackbeard had already destroyed the entire headquarters. And they clashed for a brief. Cypherpole and Blackbeard's clashed for a brief second. And what's funny is I think that's how Lucci ended up awakening. Probably, like, that was where the moment that that brought him to the awakening state, which is a conversation for a different time. But that like, that just makes sense. If he fought Blackbeard, then that could explain how Kaku and Lucci end up getting the awakening. But that's a complete separate thing. So we get an interesting thing here because the revolutionary headquarters has been a secret for decades. So how did the Navy, there's two sides of it. How did the Navy and Cypherpole, one, get the info? Who was that anonymous source? But also, if you think about it, this would mean that the Revs left beforehand, before Blackbeard got there. They didn't have to fight. They had enough time to evacuate everybody. And what's interesting is right before Blackbeard or Burgess calls in, Dragon is calling in all the Revs to Baltigo. So you almost know that, like, no, he doesn't even know about this. There was no plans to move prior. Like, he was locked in out Baltigo. And then somehow he left through an anonymous source. Cypherpole and the Navy are on the way. But the only person who really, only group that kind of figured out the Revs headquarters was Blackbeard. And so at this point, it's like, well, the only person that really makes sense for that job, because at that point Kuzan is on the crew, would it make sense that as Kuzan having an ulterior motive, right? Like he knows that Dragon is related to Garp. He's like, he did a favor when it came to Luffy. Maybe he like warned the Navy. He might have been
But
the
think about
anonymous
it as
source.
well. My headcanon about him, the separation.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing he would want is the dissolution of the revolutionaries.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Right?
exactly.
Like that would be like, no, I don't want. I definitely don't want that to happen because he understands how important they are. But then Aokiji also give word to Akainu about something. He said it's the, I forgot what he told somebody to tell Akainu. Was it in Dressrosa? Was it in Punk Hazard?
It's probably Punk Hazard with Smoker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with Smoker. He
I don't
said
remember
he's so
exactly though.
so it's like he's still relaying information
Mm-hmm.
about what's going on. So again, like if he doesn't really if he's truly a bad guy, why does any of that matter?
Right.
Why
Right.
even save Smoker?
So it makes sense that Kuzan was the person that leaked him. He doesn't need to be in Sword because he has his own agenda, whether he likes the Revs or he's doing a favor to Garp, right? Because it's like at the end of the day, he saved Luffy. He likes,
Mhm.
like he's saving Kobe right now. He didn't freeze him. So if he hears like, oh, Blackbeard's crew is going towards the Revs, he could Garp enough to be like, yo, like let me do this heads up, because this isn't his end goal, right? He's still being himself, right? But here's the thing. Here's the thing with that. The Blackbeard crew. Oh, and then the other part of it is like the timing of it. It almost makes sense that it has to be like from Blackbeard's crew that this whole plan was leaked, because the Navy and Cypher Pole clashed with Blackbeard and not the Revs, right? Like it's a very interesting thing. But here's the problem with all of that. Kuzan could have leaked that Blackbeard was going to the Revs, but he couldn't leak the location. The reason why is because Burgess only told them to follow his Vivre card. He didn't have the location. So unless Kuzan was mailing out the Vivre card somehow, the Navy and Cypher Pole had to have gotten the location from a different source.
Okay.
And now that source, right? If we think about what Sword is, if Sword, based off of what we know, is infiltrating groups that are super, super important to level the balance of the world, then wouldn't it make sense that they have a member in the Revolutionary Army that's keeping tabs of the world's worst criminal and their organization?
Sword specifically, yes.
Yeah, it would make sense, right?
Yes.
And
Yes, because then there's a separation there because if it was the Navy or the world government, they'd be more, I think, eager to move on them. Where for the Sword, it's like it's just strictly tabs. Like
yeah.
we just want to know how they're moving. So yeah, I would say so. I wouldn't be surprised if there was something like that.
Yeah, it's not like Drake was sent in to kill Kaido. Like that's not like DKK is the craziest thing. But like, you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't send Drake in as a Sword member to be like, yo,
No.
when shit hits the fan, you gotta kill him, right? Like
Yeah,
no,
I don't
that's
think so.
not what the point is. It's informing them so that they can have what did Drake do when he called Kobe? He's like, yo, Big Mom and Kaido are here. Do we have reinforcements? And Kobe's like, no, we don't. We're fighting the warlords right now, right? So Drake was calling in reinforcements in preparation for something. And I think it's the same thing in this situation. There is a Sword member in the Revs, and I think it makes the most sense that the leader of Sword is in the Revs. He's infiltrated the Revs, which is why we don't get to see him often, which is why he's still hidden. He can't operate in this way. And the thing is, there is a character that fits every single avenue of this the role. And I'm saying that this character would be an admiral level character. This is an admiral of the Navy if he chose to be there. And the thing is, we know that there's a certain group that does choose to not take advancements. And the thing is, it's like, when you look at Garp is clearly admiral level, clearly at any point in his life, probably easily admiral level, even now. And the thing is, it's like if you, but he's refused it. And the thing is, there's been a person who's been working with him for his entire life, pretty much, that has the embodiment, right? You said that Garp doesn't really fit sword ideals. The thing is, like, in order to be in sword, you'd have to be a spy, right? Like, you'd have to be someone who can keep secrets, right? Kobe and Drake are like having a midnight conversation to each other in the middle of nowhere, and Kobe's like hiding out from his own Marines. And Garp is out here spilling that he's related to Dragon. He can't keep secrets. Garp is literally out here saying like, yo, telling like Kuzan everything, and then Kuzan's like, yeah, you say what's on your mind, right? That it's multiple times where it's like Luffy couldn't do it, Garp wouldn't either. They're too similar. They're not keeping secrets. They're just out front. Like when Luffy with Whole Cake Island, he just blurted out everything, right? Like exactly what he wanted to do, and was Bej was like, yo, hello, and then it still ended up working. So like it doesn't make sense that he's there. You need to be a spy. And the thing is, in order to be in look at what happened to Drake. Drake wasn't good enough as a spy. He got caught. He got the Queen and was it Who's Who being a really good spy from Cypher Pole was able to figure out that Drake wasn't on their side. And so in order to be in the Revs, because the Revs on its own is a spy organization, you have to be a super spy. If you have to be a spy in Sword and a spy in the Revs, you have to be the most spy-like character. And that leads us to why it feels like Garp is the leader of Sword. It's because his original design wasn't him. His original design was Bogard. Bogard being a private detective, which is like, if there was any character that was in this realm of Garp, he is the best person to replace what you might, if you think Garp is the leader of Sword, replace it with Bogard, and it makes so much sense. The person who trained Kobe and Helmeppo, Bogard. If Kuzan was under what's it called, was mentored at any part by Garp, Bogard probably trained him as well. Which if we go back to the Dressrosa example, Kuzan might have contacted Bogard. He might have told Bogard about this situation, and Bogard was the one who leaked the Revolutionary Headquarters location. And the reason why is, well, he already told the Revs to leave, and then the Revs would want to call the Cypher Pole. Having Blackbeard and Cypher Pole clash, that's exactly what they would want, because that's what they need. They need Cypher Pole to be preoccupied.
Bogard is kind of liaison as well between Dragon and Garp.
Exactly.
Because he's leader of Sword. And I would assume Sword, being this rogue part of the Marines, or somewhat, like you said, Black Ops, them having a relationship with Dragon, it's taboo, but it makes sense for them because they're a secret organization as well.
Exactly. They have,
so we kind of help each other out.
And then here's another thing. Why would Bogard be the best person to enter into the Revs? Well, hey, if Dragon was Garp's kid and was raised by him at any part, we know a trend with Garp. He doesn't really raise his own people. Like he kind of
somebody else raised them.
And if back in the day, I wouldn't be surprised if Bogard was the person that was essentially
raised Dragon
related,
or helping to raise Dragon,
like the in between person. And so it could be that, hey, if Dragon, you said it earlier on that like Dragon sees Garp and sees like, this isn't the sense of justice I like, right? So I'm gonna do it separate. But we also note that Garp doesn't really dislike what Dragon is doing. Wouldn't it make sense that Garp doesn't have any negative intentions because he knows what Dragon is doing, because his right hand man is in the Revs keeping tabs, but also might be supporting it? You know what I mean? Like their line of logic, it all flows in together. And that goes back to like, hey, what I said is that Bogard would be Admiral level. Well, when you think about right hands, right? The thing about it is like, we think Rayleigh is him. We think back in the day, Rayleigh was a monster. Obviously, he's a tier below Roger, but Roger, Whitebeard, Garp, we can, Whitebeard didn't necessarily have that right hand, but Marco, there, whatever, but he's not as old as Rayleigh, right? If Rayleigh was with Roger for 30 plus years, because we know Bogard was with Garp for 27 years minimum, and at that time Bogard was still really young, the same age looking. He looked exactly the same. Bogard was probably with Garp back at God Valley even. Like I wouldn't be surprised. And it could be that this that right hand mentality, right? Like it wouldn't make sense. What does Garp say like to Kuzan? It's like if you don't have if you're wavering, you're a weakling. We see time and time again. It's like you can't be around Garp if you're weak. Was it like a few months with near Garp made Kobe into a monster, right?
Helmeppo into like
Yeah, Helmeppo into a monster, Kobe into a monster.
Helmeppo surpassed his dad in a couple of years. You know, it's crazy.
Kobe's now a captain, and it's like if Bogard is involved in that, if there's any trickle down, Bogard has been with Garp for that long. He's probably the strongest dude, honestly, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's admiral level. And here's one more thing: he actually follows the pattern that Oda made for admirals. He is based off of a movie character 1-to-1, even name wise. And keep in mind, this was Garp's original design. So I wouldn't be surprised if Garp Oda and originally wanted Garp to be the sword leader, but then later changed his mind and kept Bogard because that's how important this character is. The Bogard is based off of Humphrey Bogart,
right?
From Casablanca, and that movie is about this dude who's working. He's kind of like disgruntled a little bit, and he's working within a system and supporting a resistance. He's helping refugees escape World War II Germany, and he ends up by the end of the movie helping a resistance leader through the port of Portugal, which ironically Garp, Dragon, Luffy, Oda gave Luffy Brazilian heritage. I wouldn't be surprised if that's tying into the Portugal reference, which ties back to Goa Kingdom and all of that. Yeah. So Oda kept that admiral a pattern, the name, not the naming scheme, but the inspiration scheme with Bogard. And so I think Bogard might be the admiral of sword that's leading up, that eventually we're going to learn about him in the future when it comes to sword. And that's probably when we're going to end up learning about the Revs, learning about the Marines, learning about Garp, learning about Kuzan. We probably learn a lot about all these characters because Dragon, Kuzan, Kobe, they all probably passed through Bogard. Every character that passed through Garp essentially is probably related to Bogard. And here's one other thing. There's an interesting thing that Oda did with Bogart. Bogart's name is Bogart with a T. But for some reason, Oda changed it with a D. He changed his name. Why did he replace it with a D? And, you know, people might think I'm crazy, but Bogart's probably a D-Clan member, and I wouldn't be surprised because something that's super odd about Garp is that he's a D-Clan in the Navy. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't be surprised that if one of Garp's mentalities was, hey, let me get Ace into the Navy. Let me get Luffy into the Navy. I wouldn't be surprised if he he either intentionally or unintentionally has all the D-Clan members gravitate towards him. For example, the way Saul acted seems more like a Garp mentality, which shows in how he clashes with Sengoku, right? I wouldn't be surprised. And we see Saul with Garp in chapter 0, but you know, going back to it, it's like that would be another reason why the Revs would be super interesting having Bogard in there. There's no other D-Clan there. It would make sense that when we see that all of the people who are changing the world, Rocks with the Rocks Pirate, Roger, Garp, Monkey D. Dragon, Monkey D. Luffy, if Sword is on that tier but on the Marine side, then it would make sense that a D-Clan member is leading it. But also, here's another thing. The actor for Bogart, Humphrey, his real name is Humphrey D. Bogart. He's his middle name is DeForest. And again, this is Oda's original design for Garp that he kept. That DeForest thing is super interesting. And
that's really interesting.
Yeah, and so like, you know, when I saw the DeForest thing, it's like, oh man, Bogart's gonna end up fighting Green Bull 100% because Green Bull is like the Cypher Pole, like, you know, kind of esque admiral kind of guy,
right?
And so like, you know, I shotgunned this idea out, but it's funny because everything leading up into this conversation kind of led it there because people thought Kuzan was there, people thought Garp was there, but I don't see that for either of them. And then you got to ask yourself, who's left? Are we gonna get a new character? Are we gonna get you know, a different situation with Sword? My camera froze, but we'll keep it going. But essentially, right, it's like it's my question now at this point is, do you see that happening? How plausible is this storyline now? Would you like it? How plausible it is? Does it make sense to you? And um yeah,
Hmm.
how do you feel about that?
Um, I like it a lot. I actually like that theory a lot about Bogart being the leader of Sword. Um, about um him and his interaction with the revolutionaries. Um, I think him. I mean, obviously, like his design is Garp's initial design. The plan was the Humphrey D. Bogart thing. That's a very interesting thing, and I think he makes the most sense to be the leader of Sword. And he's a character that, shout out to my boy Steve-O. He's been talking about Bogart, and he talks about other guys that were hanging with some of the legends back in the day that doesn't get enough credit. He talked about Bogart. He talked about Big Mom's first husband or first baby daddy, which isn't as obvious.
Uh-huh.
Um, but what's his name? What's the name of that chef?
Strawson.
Jason.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which more than likely he's Pero's father, which feels weird because of of the difference between like when you met Big Mom, how young she was, and all that different stuff. It feels like okay, that's kind of um. But yeah, so like guys like that. So like no, um, as much as I want to hate it, I like it. I like it a lot actually.
I
I think going forward, that's kind of how I'm gonna view the leader of Sword is Bogart. I like it.
there's still more to it, which I'll get to later. But it's like at this point, it's I think that's like when we look at Kuzan, we look at Garp clashing, and
Mm,
we have these question marks about like where are these guys' allegiances? And I think ultimately these are two characters that have their own agendas in a lot of way, and even more so, um, these are also characters that probably wouldn't be leading that kind of organization, and there's probably a better character for all of that. And here, I think I got my camera back up. Yep, it's my goofier camera, but we're still out here just to have it in the video. um but yeah, like, and so I'll leave you with a few things, because I know this we push a lot of thoughts into this into this chapter. But I think when it comes to the last saga, we're going to get a lot more like what resolve means. I think I like what you said about Kuzan. He is resolved. He's resolved to himself. The question is,
yeah.
does he stick on the same path, or does he keep on bouncing? And I think the strength of resolve is based off of like, not necessarily how stubborn, but how one track you end up being,
Right.
no matter how goofy that ends up sounding. But um
Which Garp kind of is.
yeah, and then on top of that, it's like there's probably other factions. Fujitora being a part of the Bureau of Investigation to me makes a lot of sense. I think that, like that, I think maybe Akainu and others had different ideas. When you kind of think about it, the Shichibukai, the warlord system, that's something that Akainu was caping for, right? Like he was like, "Oh, Fujitora, you don't like that, but I do." You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
like it's an interesting line of logic, because it's like that might have been his version of Sword, which is ironic because it's a pirate who's acting on behalf of the Navy, which is what Drake and possibly Law and possibly Kuzan could be doing. But I think the one thing that we should be looking forward to is a lot more than we realize for the Marines. I think the Marines is they're gonna become so uh detailed, complex, in depth, more so than anybody realized. Because we go into the last saga, obviously the world government's at the forefront, but the Marines are also there. Them separating from the world government would make, like, we would almost need the exposition on all the sides of justice. Why would Oda introduce so many versions of justice, if not to demonstrate that, like, yo, they're not all one track minded, and it makes more sense that they're all should act a little bit more freely. And that's one interesting note. And the other side of it is, I think Sword is probably going to be the most important one, because I think Sword and the Revs are going to be tied. The biggest question is Bogard with the Revs because he believes in them. I think
Yeah.
so. I think what you said about Kuzan, like supporting it, Garp
Mhm.
doesn't dislike the Revs. I think the Revs and Sword are the ultimate one, where all the other best, all the other factions of the world or the Navy probably is still within the Marines, but Sword is probably the one that crossed over to the Revs and is going to bring around the ultimate change. And that's the reason why. And I'm going to end the video with this. I'm going to leave you with this thought, Brago, is I think, and I tease it in the video, but I don't explain it here. And I got to sell people on the Bogard part first, is I think Bogard might become the next mentor of the Straw Hats. I think that is a parallel from Roger Rayleigh. Rayleigh ended up becoming the mentor. But if Garp leaves the story and we need a character that gives, like, Rayleigh gave us insight about the pirate world in a small way, he told Luffy about certain characters like Karakuri and stuff like that, right? But I think Bogard would fit in perfectly, because another thing about Sword is they know about Vegapunk, which would be really, really helpful here at this moment. He'd know about Sword. He knows about the Navy. He would know about Revs. He would probably know about Dragon. He would definitely know about the world government. And on top of that, if he's as strong as I think he is, and he doesn't even need to be stronger, but he could be the person that mentors Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro. There's a thematic behind all of them, where it's the spy thing for Sanji, the restraint and resolve of like emotions. Bogard's relatively emotionless, has to deal with a Garp-like character. With Hockey, I can see somewhere where it's like Bogard teaches him stuff that like Garp knows about. And then on the other side, he's also a swordsman, which makes sense for Sword, a swordsman leading Sword. And then
right.
also Zoro, if he's stronger than what we give him credit for, then he might actually be a really good mentor for Zoro. And his swordsmanship is actually the one thing that has been highlighted. He was the first person to show the EI sheathing technique in the entire series, which is like, wait a second, that's actually kind of important. So I can see that world, and for me, I think that Bogard could actually be showing up at Egghead. If we see Sabaody paralleling with Kizaru and then Rayleigh stopping that, and if the Gorosei and Bogard, right? And the way you want to get out is through stealth. So I think it makes a lot of sense that Bogard is there. And so that is why I have a 50-minute Bogard theory coming out. And I know you don't, we got beef, Brago, so you don't have to check it out, but that's why I had to bring you on the call to bridge the gap. You know what I mean?
No, I'm interested in this theory. I mean, I agree with it. I like the supporting evidence. I like how far it goes. I like what it would mean to the story, especially with a character like that, as important as we think he is, never really getting highlighted. Him being highlighted with all this going on with those factions right now would be perfect. So, yeah, man, I like it. I like it a lot.
It makes the Marines super cool. It makes the Marines dope. Yeah.
Nah, I'm with it. Oh man.
So
now I wish we could dig deep into the theory, but I gotta dip out.
Yeah.
I gotta dip out. But no, Par, this is dope. You know, we gotta have another talk. I mean, it's break week, so we gotta part 2. We can do part 2 over the break. Let's make it happen.
There's a lot of things that we gotta talk about for sure. So with that, Brago, thank you for coming in and hearing the Bogard hype. Make sure to send it over to who is it that your homie that I gotta shout him out.
That had the idea about Stebo,
Bogard, Stebo, Xavier Wolfman. I got a video coming for you too.
Stebo,
love it. And thank you guys for listening to this, and look forward to my merch. My merch is coming out, and so is Brago's. He's possibly wearing it. So with that, guys, thank you for supporting. Members, always appreciate you guys got early release, and see you guys. Look forward to the future videos.
Peace out.